Hello, welcome to British English with Alexandre. Here I am, back with this course again. Today we're gonna be talking about another important lesson about our construction of the English language. I've been away for some time addressing some personal problems, but sorry, but here I am back with you again. Today we're gonna be talking about another super important lesson so that we can consolidate our English. But before anything else, please, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Subscribe, give it a like, share the content so that we can keep up the good work. Okay, without any further ado, let's get started with the lesson. This is Unit 28. Today we're gonna be talking about verbs, objects or objects, and complements. Complements. Verbs, objects, and complements. Okay, this is section A. Let's read the text together and understand it. Some verbs can be either transitive or intransitive. What's that about? When a verb is transitive, it means that it requires an object. It might be a direct object or an indirect object, but that doesn't come to case now. Or the verb can be intransitive, which means that by itself and in itself it's already understood. It doesn't require a complement. But don't worry about that. When we are doing the practice examples, you're gonna see that it's easier than it looks. But anyway, let's continue. Some verbs can be either transitive or intransitive, allowing us to focus on either the person or thing performing the action or the person or thing affected by the action. Compare. She closed the door. She closed the door. She closed the door. She closed what? The verb requires an object. She closed what? She closed the door. The door was closed. She practiced the action of closing the door, and the door, with the object, suffered the action. So this is a transitive verb. But that verb can also be intransitive. For example, the door was closed. It's in the passive. The door closed. The door closed, or the door was closed by her. The door closed. You cannot already understand what happened. The door closed. Perhaps the wind forced it to close. In that case, the verb is intransitive. You don't need an object. Another example, I've ripped my shirt. This is transitive because you might say, I've ripped my shirt. You've ripped what? I've ripped my shirt. So it suffers the action of the verb to rip. In that case, it's transitive because it requires an object. On the other hand, it might be intransitive, written like that. My shirt has ripped. My shirt has ripped. It has ripped by itself and in itself. So it's quite easy to understand, right? Okay, that pattern can be used, for example, also with those verbs here. I'm just gonna read them so you can practice your pronunciation, because it's quite important to know. It's also interesting to know the meaning of those verbs. I don't recommend you learn verbs, whatever, just by like individual things. You should put them into a context. But anyway, Also, we're learning pronunciation, so I'm just gonna read the the verbs so you can know how they might be pronounced. On the purpose of this video. So we have the verb to begin, which means to start, band, which means making something like that, band. We can break, make it apart, break, burn, you might burn through fire, change, decrease, it means to diminish, decrease, drop, like dropping the mic, the microphone, finish, to end, increase, to go up, increase, move, you move to one place or another, open, shut, like shut up, shut your mouth, start, to begin, vary, and wake, when you wake up in the morning. Most are change verbs. Okay, now let's move on to section B. Some transitive verbs don't need an object or an object when the meaning is clear from the context. For example, I often sing in the shower. I often sing in the shower. When I'm in the shower, I'm singing. Of course, because the verb is very clear. I often sing. I often sing in the shower. You often sing what? Songs, of course. So it's clear. There's clearness of the verb. So in that case, we might not need an object after the verb. Another example, she plays beautifully. She plays what? The saxophone. But it's clear from the context that she plays an instrument, in that case the saxophone. She plays the saxophone beautifully. She plays beautifully. She plays beautifully what? The saxophone. You might use that pattern with the verbs, also with the verbs answer, ask, change, cook, dance, drink, drive, eat, fail, park, phone, read, smoke, study, wash, wash up the dishes, wave, win. All right. Okay, moving on. This is section C. After some verbs, we usually add a complement, a phrase which completes the meaning of a verb, noun or adjective, with an adverb or prepositional phrase. For example, the disease originated in Britain. If you don't mention the place as a complement, you might say something like, the disease originated, and you go like, okay, where did it originate? It originated where? Or wherever. It originated in Britain, or in Brazil, in the United States, in the UK, in China, in Bangkok, wherever it might be. So, some verbs like these, we might add a complement. It's obligatory. It's compulsory. I don't like to repeat wrong examples. I like to read correct examples for not confusing your understanding. Basically, we need to add something about where or how it originated. Okay, moving on. Other verbs usually have a complement, but may not. Compare. He paused for a few moments. He paused for a few minutes. He paused for a few days, he paused for a few weeks, he paused for a few months, he paused for a few years. And we can also say he paused because the verb allows that understanding. In that case, no complement is needed. So it allows those, that kind of a verb allows those situations. You might refer to it with a complement or not. Okay, moving on now to section D. Some verbs are commonly followed by a particular preposition or prepositions and then an object. For example, we had to deal with hundreds of complaints. We had to deal with hundreds of complaints. We had to deal with hundreds of complaints. You might not say we had to deal with, because the meaning is incomplete. I had to deal with, you had to deal with what? Hundreds of complaints. Oh, okay. We had to deal with hundreds of complaints. This is a pattern specifically used with that kind of a verb, or some of those verbs. Another example, I'm sure that blue car belongs to Murad. I'm sure about what? That the blue car belongs to Murad. I'm sure about something. You can't say I'm sure about I'm sure that blue car belongs to, or I'm sure that blue car, you're sure about what? That blue car belongs to Murad. Oh, okay, I can understand. It needs a complement with a specific preposition. With that pattern, we can use the verbs to adhere to adhere to, aspire to, or even culminating, or culminate with, culminate in, or culminate with, or even the verb detract from. For example, you can't detract from your principles and virtues. To differentiate between A and B, or incline towards, or even specialize in something. Okay, moving on. Section E. Some verbs are usually followed by an object plus prepositional phrase complement. For example, I always associate pizza with Italy. So we have the object pizza. I always associate. Oh, you always associate what? I associate pizza. Okay, but you associate pizza with what? With Italy. So those kind of verbs need a prepositional phrase complement. So for example, I always associate pizza with Italy. I'm not gonna read the wrong example because it does no good for learning. You associate A with B, or B with C, whatever. Another example, she put the report on the floor. She put the report. She put the report where? She put the report on the floor. What was put on the floor? The report. You might ask the verb. She put what? The report. Where? On the floor. She put the report on the floor. Yeah, that's how it works. I'd like just to remind you that that relation between verb, object, and complement is really important, really interesting to understand, without going into any details. We can also use that pattern with the verbs to attribute something to another thing, or base on something, or base upon something. Remember, upon is the mixture of the prepositions up and on. Up and on. Upon. With the verbs equate with, to make it equal with something else. To equate with. Also with the verbs to inflict on. To inflict on. On. Not on. but on, to inflict on, mistake for, regard us, or regard with, and remind of. Remind of something, for example. Okay, moving on to section F, or f sound. Some verbs are often followed by an object plus adjective or adjective phrase complement. For example, the people of this country will hold the government responsible. The people of this country will hold the government responsible. So notice that we say the people of this country will hold the government. This is the object of the verb to hold, but it's followed by the adjective responsible. That means that the government will be considered responsible. Another example, Conti pronounced herself fit for the match. For example, Conti pronounced herself what? It's needed an object followed by an adjective. Conti pronounced herself fit for the match. Who pronounced herself fit for the match? Conti. Conti pronounced what? Conti pronounced herself what? She pronounced herself fit for the match. Conti pronounced herself fit for what? For the match. For the what? The match. Conti pronounced herself fit for the match. Fit for the match. Conti pronounced herself. It doesn't interest for us the order of events. What's important is to understand the relation between the subject, the object, the complement, etc. Also, we can use those examples, that pattern with the verbs to assume, believe, consider, declare, find, judge, prove, report, think. The object after declare, find, pronounce, and prove is usually a reflexive pronoun. Okay, moving on. Sentences with an object plus adjective complement after these verbs are usually rather formal, which means that they're not so important for us, but adding to be after the object or using a that clause can make sentences less formal, that is, informal or more colloquial, which is really important in terms of spoken English. For example, Dr. Adams argues that house prices will fall, but other economists believe the opposite true. Other economists believe the opposite true. That means they believe that prices will not fall, but it's quite formal. Now, more important for in terms of spoken English, or less formally, meaning informally or more colloquially, which is important for spoken English. Dr. Adams argues that house prices will fall, but other economists believe the opposite to be true, or believe that the opposite is true. So it's more important for us. Believe, other economists believe the opposite to be true, or believe that the opposite is true, instead of believe the opposite is true, which is more formal. That's okay. We've just reached the end of that lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel, share the content with English learners all over the world to help it increase. I intend to continue this course. We're at Unit 28. My intention is to reach Unit 100, where basically we'll be talking about all the structures that are necessary to bring your English to the next level and correct all the things that are impeding you from going further with your English, and we're trying to make it in the best way, not going much into grammar, not going much into conversation, but addressing all the things at the same time. We're addressing pronunciation, we're addressing connected speech, we're addressing elision, pronunciation, vocabulary. That's really an effective way to improve your English, believe me. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed it. Please don't forget to subscribe and share the content. Cheers!